Hi, my name is Ben, and today I'll be taking you on a journey to cybersecurity with FIXITGEARWARE-SECURITY. On today's topic, we'll be talking about API, which is also known as Application Programming Interface. So, what is an API? Before we define what an API is, first let's have an understanding on how various applications communicate. Assuming you're Mr. Stickman here, and you have a conglomerate of businesses. These businesses span across toiletries, grocery stores, electrical stores, antique stores, and furniture stores. These are all the various franchises which you own as Mr. Stickman. Now let's dissect these various business or companies which is owned by Mr. Stickman. For example, the toiletry store, as we know, sells toiletries. It could be detergents, it could be chemicals that are used to clean germs from home appliances or dirty surfaces that are in the house. Now, for the grocery store, we know what a grocery store is all about. They sell food items. It could be vegetables, it could be your fruits, it could even be your spices, which are used for cooking. Now, when we move on to the electrical store, we know what an electrical store is all about. They sell switches, circuitries, electrical wires, or even the chandelier which you use in designing your home lightenings. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's say the antique store sells clocks, watches, or timepieces which are used during the medieval times. And these come with a price, of course, and consist of all designs. Moving on to the furniture store. This furniture store sells all furnitures. It could be the home bed, it could be children's cots, it could even be a study table, or even a sitting chair. All these are various businesses which sells various products. And these various businesses is owned by one man called Mr. Stickman. Now let's make it more interesting. Let's say you are Mr. Interested and you decided that you want to shop with one of those businesses that is owned by Mr. Stickman. And to do so, you require a mobile application or a web application to access the various softwares or web pages where these businesses host their products online. Now, when you visit each of those stores, you will be sorting these products either by product ID or by price. Then after you've done sorting these products by product ID or by price, you would be able to see if the products you selected have a discount or if there's an ongoing promotional offers. So what are discounts? Discount can be a range of offers that comes with the purchase of each of the products or buying more than one product. And promotional offers, as we know, are different from discounts in the sense that promotional offers can be running for a period of time, which could be anniversary of the company or a holiday celebration like Christmas or Easter celebration. All this information and pieces put together are what we call the product information. Now, this communication, which is assessing the product by the product ID or price, and the product being able to show the discount of each of these products and promotional offers that are ongoing, is possible through the communication of an API. So, Mr. Interested here is able to communicate with any of those stores using the application, the underlying program, which fetches the information, runs a programming code or is run by a program, and these data are fetched to Mr. Interested over the mobile phone or the computer, in this case if he's using the web application, through an interface of that application. Let's now make it more interesting. Assuming Mr. Stickman here wants to take a stock keeping. So what is stock keeping here? He decides he wants to check each stock in each of his franchise. He wants to also check the sales made by each of the stores, and furthermore, decides to check the salary expenditure for the staffs who are operating these various stores and the performance of the stores. This performance can be the key performance index of each of the staffs or can be an overall sales of each of the stores. Each time Mr. Stickman tries to view all this information, this is possible through an API. Because Mr. Stickman, as we know, is not going to be able to go to each of the stores every day to check these informations. But to be able to achieve a maximum or optimum result in gathering all this information, such as the stock keeping, the sales, the salary, and the performance, is able to achieve all this within a day using an application. Now, the application has an underlying program which is used to communicate to these various outlets or stores. And this information, when fetched to Mr. Stickman, is displayed on the interface of the application, which Mr. Stickman is using to communicate with the various database holding this data that is required by Mr. Stickman. All this communication, as we all know, is possible through the use of an API. Now we have made you understand through this brief explanation of what an API is. Let's now move on to defining what an API is all about. So what is an API? According to Mr. Stickman here, API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, a set of programming language and protocols which allows the communication between a software and various databases, or the communication between multiple softwares to fetch the requested permissible data by the user of these softwares. Looking back to this definition, we have two keywords highlighted here. One is communication, the other is permissible data. So communication here, what does it stand for? Now, when these data are being fetched, actions are being taken. These actions in programming language or in cybersecurity is able to be established using what we call verbs. So what are verbs? Verbs are usually methods such as get, put, connect, update, insert, and so on. So let's say Mr. Stickman is trying to view information about each of the stores. He's going to be using the verb get to get the informations. And if he's about to issue a memo to any of the stores through this API calls, he has to insert words or data into the database using the verb called insert or put. Now we've understood what communication here is all about. Let's now discuss about permissible data. Previously, we discussed two entities in our explanation. The first entity is Mr. Stickman, who owns the franchise, and the second entity is Mr. Interested, who wants to purchase products from each of the stores or franchise owned by Mr. Stickman. Now, when we explain these various entities involved in this explanation, you could see the information each of these entities assessed is different from the other. For Mr. Interested, we know that he was able to view the products which he decides he wants to buy. And of course, when he assessed those products, the necessary information tied to that specific product was sent back to him through the application he's using. Now, moving on to Mr. Stickman, who owns those franchises. When he tried to view those records, such as stock keeping, salary, performance, and so on, you could see the information displayed to Mr. Stickman varies from what Mr. User or Mr. Interested is viewing. If Mr. User or Mr. Interested is able to view the information being viewed by Mr. Stickman, of course we now know that that data is not permissible to be viewed because by right, Mr. Interested is not an administrator or is not the right person to view that specific data. And that is what permissible data is all about. So if you're a user of an application and you're able to see a data which you're not permitted to see when using that application, we now said you have discovered an API vulnerability. Now, moving on to next, how is API data parsed? API data, as we all know, is parsed by JSON. So what is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So for example, when you try to access your website, the data passed to you is parsed using HTML. And CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheet, is used to beautify the color and texture of this data. Now let's move further. Let's say you're using an Android application to purchase or make a buy on your mobile phone. That mobile application, if it's on Android, runs on a software code known as Java. And if it's running on an iOS device, it's using either Swift or whatever object-oriented programming used in designing that application. So in this case, when it comes to API, whenever a data is requested, those data are fetched in a very fine-tuned manner using what we call JavaScript object notation. Now let's discuss a sample code of a JSON data when an API is being called. Seeing this data here, we are taking products as an example. Here we have the ID, we have the name, we have the promo, we have the discount, and we have the price. First, let's understand this data. This data contains products. Now, if you have an understanding of how a database is like or how the structure of a database is designed, we know a database itself is the database and it contains a table, and each table contains various columns. So what is a table? A table is a structure that is storing specific data that is assigned to specific functionalities on the application using that database. For example, for products will be responsible in storing every information that has to do with products on that web application or mobile application. And let's say this website publishes blogs content. There will be a table for blog content which sits inside the database. Now let's take it a bit further. Let's say this website is able to store user data. Then these users who uses this application will have a specific table which stores their information. Now you see the beauty of how JSON data is parsed. So products here is a table, and the ID here is the column which holds the ID of that specific product that is being accessed. The name here is the column which holds the name of that product which owns the ID number 1. Now for promo is another column that is tied to the product name, which is held by the product ID in the products table. Now when you see the table again, you can see the column name. The data it holds is a string, Mr. Muscle, and this data is enclosed in parentheses because when it comes to data being fetched, strings are enclosed in parentheses, and Boolean values such as true or false are not enclosed in any parentheses because the database understands this data that it's a Boolean data. Now, if we move down further, we can see the ID and the price. The values are displayed without parentheses. This is because when it comes to data values of integer data type, these values are not enclosed in parentheses. And so this is how the structure of a JSON data via an API call is displayed to the user each time the user calls a specific product that is associated with a table in that database. And that is a summary of what an API is all about. As a cybersecurity professional, be you a newbie or someone who has been in the profession, It is very important to understand the structure of what or how an API communicates. By so doing, you'll be able to understand possible leakage when it comes to information, such as personal identifiable information, which belongs to a customer, administrator, or an employee of an organization, which is not supposed to be visible to you, the penetration tester or ethical hacker. Also, it is very vital that when you understand these various connectivities that API communicates to one another, you can now further look for other vulnerabilities that has a flaw when it comes to the business logic of the application. For example, previously we discussed about promos and discount. So if an application is not running a promo, but you are able to trigger or trick the API to run a promo, that's a business logic error or flaw there. And you as an ethical hacker can be able to take advantage of that vulnerability. So with that, we have come to an end of this explanation, and we hope with this short presentation, you have understood what an API is all about. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye for now.